I'm 75. My name is Fatima. I want you to look closely at my face, at these deep lines that tell 75 years of stories. Most people my age are terrified of things like cancer, strokes, or a heart that decides it's had enough. We spend our golden years chasing doctors, clutching prescriptions, and watching our blood pressure like a ticking clock. But after living through 3 wars, 2 recessions, and the burial of my husband, David, I've realized a truth that most are too afraid to say out loud. It isn't a disease you can name that kills most of us. It's the small surrender. We call it loneliness. But we have been fundamentally lied to about what loneliness actually is. The world wants you to believe that loneliness is a lack of company. They think it's the quiet of a house where the children have grown and gone. They tell you that the cure is to stay busy. They say, "Fatima, why don't you join the community center?" Or, "Sarah would love for you to babysit the grandkids more often." They think if they can just fill your schedule with the noise of other people's lives, you'll be saved. But here is the provocative truth that no doctor will tell you. You can be in a house full of people, holding your daughter's hand, and still be drowning in the kind of loneliness that stops a heart. Loneliness isn't about who isn't in your house, it's about who isn't in your head. I spent years being the perfect grandmother. I lived for my son Michael's calls and Sarah's visits. I made myself available for every school play and every holiday dinner. I became a function, not a person. I was grandma. I was the widow. I was mom. 10 years ago, I was at the edge. My health was failing, not because of a virus, but because I had no reason to stay. Then, I started a morning ritual. It took 15 minutes. It cost nothing. And it didn't involve a single other human being. What I did every morning saved me from becoming a ghost in my own home. It brought the color back to my world when everything had turned to grey. And if you're sitting there feeling invisible, I need you to understand. The door isn't locked from the outside. You've been locking it from within. To understand why I started waking up at 5 a.m. to perform a ritual that my daughter, Sarah, thinks is eccentric, you have to understand the grey years. That's what I call the period after my husband David passed away. David was the sun. For 48 years, I was a planet orbiting him. My schedule was his schedule. My worries were his health, his business, his favorite meals. When he died, the sun went out. And I realized, with a terror that kept me awake until the birds started chirping, that I had no idea how to be a person without him. I was a 65-year-old woman who didn't know what she liked for breakfast if it wasn't David's favorite sourdough toast. For the first few years, I did what the world expects good widows to do. I became the ultimate supporting character in my children's lives. My son, Michael, he's a lawyer in the city, very busy, very successful. He'd call me every Tuesday at 7 p.m. I lived for those 7 minutes. I'd sit by the phone like a hungry dog waiting for a scrap. "How are you, Mum?" he'd ask. And I'd lie. I'd tell him about the garden or a book I hadn't actually finished. I didn't want to tell him that I had spent 4 hours staring at the dust motes dancing in the light of the living room. I didn't want to tell him that the silence in the house was so loud it made my ears ring. Then there was Sarah. She lives only 20 minutes away. She'd bring the grandkids over every Sunday. I love those children, little Leo and Grace, more than life itself. But something started happening during those Sunday dinners. I remember one specific Sunday. It was November. The house smelled like the pot roast I'd spent all day preparing. Sarah and her husband, Mark, were debanned, while I was busy being those things for them. The woman named Fatima, the one who loved poetry, the one who had opinions on the world, the one who still wanted to be someone, slowly starved to death. The loneliness that kills seniors is actually a form of self-eviction. It's the moment you decide your own life is just a waiting room for the next generation. It's the moment you stop waking up for yourself and start waking up because you're still here. Asking something about the school board. The kids were playing on their tablets. I was sitting at the head of the table, David's chair. And I realized they were talking around me, not to me. I was the grandma function. I was the provider of the roast and the baker of the cookies. If I had been replaced by a very high-quality robot that could nod and say, "That's nice, dear," I don't think they would have noticed for at least an hour. I felt a wave of loneliness so cold, it felt like ice water in my veins. I was surrounded by my own flesh and blood, in the house I'd lived in for 40 years, and I had never felt more invisible. That night, after they left, I sat in the dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I realized that my children's love, as genuine as it was actually killing me. They loved the version of me that served them. They loved the mom who was always available, always stable, always there. But that Fatima was a hollow shell. I looked at my calendar for the upcoming week. It was a desert. Doctor's appointment on Wednesday, grocery store on Thursday, maybe a phone call from Michael. That was it. I was 72 years old, and I was just waiting to die. I was doing exactly what I see so many of my friends at the senior centre doing. I was putting in time. I call it the waiting room syndrome. You stop being the protagonist of your own life, and you start sitting in the waiting room of the world, hoping someone will call your name and give you a reason to feel useful for a few minutes. That was the before. I was overweight, my joints ached, I was on 2 different medications for mild depression, and I was deeply, profoundly lonely. I thought the solution was more visits from Sarah. I thought the solution was Michael calling twice a week instead of once. I was looking for the cure outside of myself. Then came the morning of January 14th. It was freezing. The wind was rattling the window panes in the bedroom. I woke up at 4:45 a.m. because my hip was aching and I just couldn't lie there anymore. I walked into the kitchen and for some reason, instead of turning on the news to hear about all the ways the world was falling apart, I just sat by the window with a glass of water. The house was completely still. No David snoring, no kids screaming, no TV anchors shouting. And in that stillness, a thought hit me so hard I actually gasped. Fatima, if you died this morning, the only thing that would be lost is a cook and a babysitter. The woman who wanted to travel to Italy, the woman who used to paint, the woman who had a fiery spirit. She's already dead. You let her die because you thought being needed by others was the same thing as being alive. I realized I was lonely because I had abandoned myself. I had moved out of my own heart and left the lights off. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the microwave. I looked old. I looked defeated. And I got angry. Not at Sarah, not at Michael, but at myself. I had allowed my age to become an excuse for my disappearance. That was the morning I decided to stop being a ghost. I didn't know what I was doing yet. I didn't have a system. I just knew that the first hour of the day could no longer belong to my children's needs or my husband's memory. It had to belong to me. I started with something so small, it sounds ridiculous. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't check the messages to see if Michael had texted. I didn't think about what I had to do for the grandkids. I just sat there and asked myself one question. Fatima, what do you want to do today that has nothing to do with being a mother or a grandmother? The silence that followed was terrifying because for the first 10 minutes, I couldn't think of a single thing. That's how far gone I was. But then I remembered the smell of oil paints. It had been 30 years. This was the beginning of the ritual. This was the moment I stopped the small surrender. I decided that if the world was going to treat me like I was invisible, I was going to make sure I was the most vibrant, visible person in the room, even if I was the only one in the room. I'm going to tell you exactly what that ritual became. But you have to understand the stakes. If you are sitting where I was, waiting for the phone to ring, feeling like a guest in your own family, you aren't just sad. You are in a high-stakes battle for your soul. And the morning is your only battlefield. People often ask me, Fatima, what is the secret? Is it a supplement? Is it a specific diet? Is it a new hobby? They want a pill or a product because that's what we've been conditioned to look for. But the framework that saved me, the ritual that brought me back from the edge of that small surrender, is something far more radical and far more difficult. It is the practice of radical self-reoccupation. I call it my morning sanctuary. It consists of 4 distinct pillars. If you miss one, the whole structure of your day collapses back into the grey. I had to learn this the hard way, by failing at it for months, until I understood the mechanics of how a soul actually stays alive in an aging body. The first pillar is what I call the fast from the world. We are the first generation of seniors who are being devoured by the digital umbilical cord. When I wake up, the very first thing my hand wants to do is reach for that smartphone on the nightstand. Why? Because I'm looking for proof that I still exist in the minds of others. I'm looking for a like on a photo of my garden, or a text from Michael, or a news headline that gives me something to be outraged about. But here is the rule of the sanctuary. For the first 30 minutes of the day, the world does not exist. No phone, no television, no radio. When you check your phone the moment you wake up, you are essentially inviting the entire world and all its demands, tragedies and expectations into your bed before you've even had a chance to breathe. You are starting your day in a reactive state. You are waiting to see what the world wants from you. To save yourself from loneliness, you must first prove that you are comfortable in your own company without the validation of a blue light. I had to learn to sit in the silence of my kitchen and listen to the house breathe. I had to realize that if no one texted me, I was still Fatima. I was still whole. The second pillar is the mirror of recognition. This sounds simple, but it is the hardest part for most of us who have spent decades serving others. I go into the bathroom, I turn on the light, and I look myself directly in the eyes. I don't look at the wrinkles. I don't look at the sagging skin or the spots. I look at the person behind the eyes. And I say my name out loud. Good morning, Fatima. I don't say, good morning, Mom. I don't say, good morning, Grandma. I use the name my parents gave me before I belonged to anyone else. Why is this important? Because loneliness in old age is a form of identity theft. We become the senior, the patient, the widow. We lose the sound of our own names. By looking at myself and speaking to myself, I am performing an act of re-entry. I am moving back into my own skin. I am acknowledging that the woman who wanted to see the world and the woman who loved to dance is still in there, and she deserves to be seen by the most important person in her life, herself. The third pillar is the micro-reclamation. Every single morning, I do one thing, just one, that is for no one but Fatima. For me, it started with those oil paints I mentioned. I don't paint masterpieces. I paint colours on a canvas for 15 minutes. Sometimes I just write a single paragraph in a journal about a dream I had. The rule is this: it cannot be productive in the eyes of the world. It shouldn't be service. It shouldn't be cleaning the kitchen or prepping the roast for Sarah's visit. It must be an act of pure, selfish joy. I want to introduce you to someone I know from the senior centre, a woman named Martha. Martha is the perfect contrast to what I'm describing. Martha is a giver. She spends every waking hour doing things for her church, for her kids, for her neighbours. Everyone says, "Oh, Martha is so wonderful. She's always so busy." But if you look into Martha's eyes when she's sitting still for a moment, you see a terrifying void. Martha is terrified of the morning sanctuary. She is terrified of being alone with herself because she has no micro-reclamation. She has no inner life left. She has given it all away in exchange for the feeling of being needed. And because she has no inner life, the moment her children don't call, or the moment the church doesn't need a bake sale, Martha falls into a deep, dark pit of despair. She is useful, but she is not alive. I refuse to be Martha. I chose to be Fatima, the woman who paints messy, beautiful, useless things just because she wants to. The fourth and final pillar is the narrative command. Before I leave my kitchen and enter the real world, I decide what the story of my day will be. Most seniors let the day happen to them. They wait to see how their joints feel. They wait to see who calls. They wait to see what's on the news. They are the audience of their own lives. I decide my narrative. I say, "Today, I am an explorer," or "Today, I am a student." Even if all I'm doing is going to the grocery store, I go as an explorer. I look for things I've never noticed. I talk to the cashier as a human being, not as a customer. I take the steering wheel of my consciousness back. This framework, the fast, the mirror, the reclamation, and the command, creates a shield. When Sarah comes over later in the day and starts talking around me, or when Michael forgets to call, it doesn't pierce me anymore. Why? Because I am already full. I have already spent the best part of my day with a woman I actually like. I am no longer a hungry ghost begging for attention. I am a sovereign woman who happens to be 75 years old. The reason this saves you from the loneliness that kills is because that specific kind of death requires your cooperation. It requires you to agree that you are a finished product, a closed book. It requires you to stay in the waiting room. But when you follow this framework, you realize the book isn't closed. You're just starting a new chapter that has nothing to do with being a mother or a wife. Martha thinks I'm being self-centered. My daughter Sarah thinks I'm becoming a bit difficult because I don't always answer the phone the second she rings. But they don't realize that I am finally, for the first time in 75 years, actually home. And the lights are finally on. In the next section, I'm going to tell you about the shadow, the lies we tell ourselves that keep us trapped in the waiting room. Because if you don't face the shadow, the morning ritual will just be a mask. You have to understand what you're really afraid of. Now, I need to tell you something that is going to hurt. If you've made it this far, it's because you're tired of the platitudes. You're tired of the live, laugh, love signs and the patronizing smiles from people half your age who think your brain turned into mush the moment you started collecting Social Security. But the truth I'm about to give you isn't something your children will tell you. They're too polite, or too guilty, or too busy. The brutal truth is this: the loneliness you are feeling is not a tragedy inflicted upon you by a cold world. It is a consequence of the choices you are making every single morning. You, sitting there right now, yes, a you, have become an accomplice in your own disappearance. We love to play the martyr, don't we? We sit by the phone and tally up the days since Michael last called. We keep a mental scoreboard of how many times Sarah brought the grandkids over this month versus last month. We tell ourselves, after everything I did for them, after the sacrifices I made, This is the thanks I get? Silence? We wrap ourselves in the shroud of the abandoned elder because it feels safer to be a victim than to admit that we have become profoundly boring people. That is the shadow. That is the lie. Why do we do this? Why do we choose the resentment over the morning sanctuary? It's simple. Because being a victim is easy. If the world is the problem, you don't have to change. If your children are ungrateful, then you get to keep your moral high ground while you rot in your recliner. But if you admit that you are lonely because you have nothing to offer the world except your memories and your needs, then you have to do the hard work of reclamation. Look at Martha. I mentioned her before, the woman from the senior centre who is always busy but never alive. Martha called me last Tuesday, weeping. She was devastated because her daughter Jennifer had cancelled their lunch plans for the third time. Martha said to me, "Fatima, I don't understand. I live for those lunches. They are the only thing I have." And there it was, the confession. They are the only thing I have. Do you realize how heavy that is for a child to carry? When you make your children the sole source of your joy, you aren't loving them. You are emotionally kidnapping them. You are turning Michael and Sarah into oxygen tanks, and when they have to go live their own lives, when they have to breathe for themselves, you start to suffocate. Of course they pull away, wouldn't you? Who wants to visit a person who is essentially a giant walking needs met sign? The brutal truth is that we have become addicted to being needed. We spent 40 years being the center of our family's universes, and we haven't figured out how to exist without that gravity. So we manufacture crises. We complain about our health just a little more than necessary. We keep our houses like museums of 1985 because we're terrified of moving into the present. We are waiting for a rescue that is never coming because the people we expect to rescue us are drowning in their own lives. I look at my daughter, Sarah. She's 42. She's got a career, a mortgage, and 2 kids who are entering that age where they think she's the most embarrassing person on earth. She is exhausted. When she comes to see me, she doesn't need a mother who is a vacuum of, "Why haven't you called?" She needs a mother who is a source of strength, a mother who has her own world, a mother who is so full of her own life that she doesn't need to suck the life out of Sarah's. When I started my morning ritual, the first thing I had to kill was my expectation of others. I had to realize that if I never saw my children again, I still had a responsibility to be a person. Most of you are living in a state of waiting for permission. You're waiting for the doctor to tell you it's okay to exercise. You're waiting for your son to tell you it's okay to spend the inheritance on a trip to Italy. You're waiting for the world to tell you that you still matter. But here is the mortality accelerant you need to hear. You are 70, 80, maybe 90 years old. You do not have the luxury of time to wait for someone to give you back your soul. Every morning you wake up and reach for that phone to see if someone else has validated your existence is a morning you have spat in the face of the miracle of being alive. We talk about the loneliness that kills. It doesn't kill you by stopping your heart. It kills you by making your life so small that your heart decides there's no reason to keep beating. It's a slow evaporation. You stop learning, you stop curiosity. You stop being Fatima, and you start being the lady in apartment 4B. If you want to survive this, you have to stop being a consumer of other people's attention and start being a creator of your own peace. I see the way people look at me now when I go to the grocery store. I don't walk like a woman who is waiting for a phone call. I walk like a woman who just spent an hour painting a sunrise. A woman who has a secret. And that secret is that I don't need them to see me because I have already seen myself. Martha thinks I'm cold. She thinks I've distanced myself from my family. No, I've just stopped using my family as a crutch. And the irony? Since I started my morning sanctuary, Sarah visits more. Michael calls more. Not because I asked them to, but because I've become someone they actually want to talk to. I'm no longer a chore on their to-do list. I'm a person with a pulse. You have to face the void. You have to sit in that kitchen in the dark and realize that if the silence is unbearable, it's because you are uncomfortable with the person you've become in that silence. Stop blaming the children. Stop blaming the modern world. Stop blaming the technology. The door to the cage is wide open, but you're staying inside because the cage is familiar and the outside requires you to be someone again. Which will it be? Will you stay in the waiting room until they eventually carry you out of it? Or will you perform the radical act of waking up tomorrow and deciding that your life is worth living, even if no one ever says thank you again? That is the choice. There is no middle ground. You are either reclaiming yourself or you are surrendering yourself. And the clock is ticking much faster than you think. You are sitting there, perhaps in the same recliner you've occupied for years, wondering if it's too late. You're wondering if a woman named Fatima, who paints messy pictures and ignores her phone, has found a magic trick that won't work for you. You're thinking, Fatima, my knees are worse than yours. Or, Fatima, my son doesn't even call once a week, so I have nothing to fast from. Stop. That is the small surrender talking again. I am going to give you the blueprint for the great re-entry. I am going to tell you exactly what to do when your eyes open tomorrow morning. This isn't a suggestion. This is a prescription for the survival of your soul. We are going to use the mechanism of radical self-occupancy. Most seniors live in a state of self-vacancy. We are going to move you back into the house of your life and lock the doors until you are ready to receive guests. Step 1. The 30-minute digital embargo. When you wake up tomorrow, your brain is going to scream for the phone. It wants that hits of cortisol and dopamine. It wants to see if Michael sent a picture of the grandkids or if the world ended while you were asleep. Why must you resist? Because the moment you look at that screen, you have handed the keys to your consciousness to someone else. You have become a reactor. If there's a nice text, you're happy. If there's no text, you're lonely. If there's a bad news headline, you're anxious. You are letting the world dictate your internal temperature. For the first 30 minutes, the phone stays in the drawer, not on the nightstand. In the drawer. Walk to the kitchen. Pour a glass of water. Sit in the silence. Listen to the hum of the refrigerator. Feel the weight of your own body in the chair. This is the fast from the world. You are proving to your nervous system that you are safe and whole even when no one is looking at you. You are reclaiming the territory of your own mind. Step 2. The mirror of incantation. Go to the bathroom. Turn on the light. I want you to look past the cataracts, past the wrinkles, and look into your own pupils. Now say your name, out loud. I am Fatima, or whatever your beautiful name is. Then follow it with this. I am not a mother today. I am not a grandmother today. I am not a widow today. I am a woman, and I am here. Why do we do this? Because of the identity erasure that happens in our 70s. The world treats us like a monolith, the elderly. By speaking your name to your face, you are performing a cognitive reassociation. You are reminding your brain that you are a distinct, sovereign individual with a history and a future. You are ending the self-eviction. If you feel silly doing this, good. That silliness is the feeling of a long dormant part of your brain waking up. Martha, the woman I told you about, laughed when I told her this. She said, Fatima, I know who I am. But she doesn't. She knows who she is to other people. She has no idea who she is when the room is empty. Don't be Martha. Speak your name until it sounds like a command. Step 3. The 15-minute unproductive creation. This is where the radical self-occupancy takes root. You must do something that produces nothing for anyone else. If you used to knit, don't knit a sweater for the grandkid. Knit a square of neon green yarn just to see the color. If you used to write, don't write a letter to your son. Write a poem about the way the light hits the dust. For me, it was the oil paints. The mechanism here is the flow state. When we create, we are no longer old or lonely. We are in the eternal present. For 15 minutes, you are a creator. You are not a consumer. You are not waiting for a call. You are busy making something exist that didn't exist 10 minutes ago. I remember a Tuesday morning a few months ago. Sarah called me at 8:15 a.m., right in the middle of my painting time. Usually, I would have dropped everything, heart racing, thinking it was an emergency. But I looked at my hands, covered in cobalt blue, and I realized my life was happening now. The painting was more important than Sarah's boredom. I let it go to voicemail. I called her back at 10 a.m. And you know what? The world didn't end. But the woman who answered the phone at 10 a.m. was a woman who had just conquered a canvas, not a woman who had been sitting by the phone like a beggar. Step 4. The narrative script. Before you open the door or turn on the phone, you must decide what the day is for. Most of us wake up and ask, I wonder what will happen today. This is a victim's question. The survivor asks, what will I seek today? I want you to pick one micro-quest. It could be, I am going to find 3 different types of birds in the backyard. It could be, I am going to learn 1 new word in Italian. It could be, I am going to find the best tasting apple at the market. This gives your brain a search command. Instead of looking for signs of your own irrelevance, your brain is now looking for birds, or words, or apples. You have given yourself a mission. I want you to look at your hands, look at the skin. You and I both know we are in the final act of the play. We don't know if the curtain falls in 10 years or 10 minutes. Every morning you spend in the waiting room, checking the phone for a scrap of attention from people who are too busy to give it, is a morning you have thrown into the trash. It is a betrayal of every ancestor who fought for you to be here. It is a betrayal of the child you once were, who had so many dreams before life told her to be useful. Do you really want your final years to be a long, slow apology for existing? The loneliness that kills seniors is a choice to stop being the protagonist. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, you are going to make a different choice. You are going to reclaim your name. You are going to fast from the noise. You are going to create something useless and beautiful. And then, when Michael calls, or when Sarah visits, you won't be a black hole of need. You will be a sun. They will feel the heat of your life, and they will wonder what happened to the old Fatima. They won't understand, and that's okay. This isn't for them, it's for you. Tomorrow, at 5 a.m., when the sanctuary opens, will you be there, or will you be in the waiting room? I know which one I'm choosing. I have a painting to finish, and the light is perfect. In the final chapter, I'm going to tell you the most important thing of all. What happens when you finally stop being afraid of the silence? Because that is where the real wisdom lives. I'm 75, and I am finally no longer afraid of the dark. For decades, I thought the goal of life was to keep the lights on for everyone else. I thought that if I could just be enough for David, enough for Michael, enough for Sarah, then the darkness of the end would never reach me. I thought that loneliness was a monster that lived in the silence, and that my job was to drown it out with the noise of being needed. But sitting here now, After my morning ritual, I realize that the silence isn't a monster. It's a mirror. When you stop running from yourself, when you stop begging for the crumbs of other people's attention, something miraculous happens. The loneliness that kills, the one that withers the heart and dims the eyes, transforms into something else entirely. It becomes solitude. And solitude is where the real work of being a human being finally begins. I look at the painting on my kitchen table. It's not going to be in a museum. It won't win any awards. But it is proof that Fatima was here. It is proof that I didn't spend my 75th year just waiting for the phone to ring. I spent it noticing the way the blue paint bleeds into the white, the way the steam rises from my tea, and the way my own heart feels when it isn't heavy with expectation. My daughter Sarah came over yesterday. She sat at this very table, looking tired from her job and her kids. She looked at my messy canvas, and she smiled. Not a patronizing smile, but a real one. She said, "Mom, you look different lately. You look peaceful." I didn't tell her it was because I stopped making her the center of my universe. I just told her I'd finally found a good friend. She didn't realize I was talking about myself. If you are watching this, and you feel that cold hand of the small surrender tightening around your chest, I want you to remember this. You have to decide to walk through it. If this resonated with you, if you're ready to reclaim your own morning sanctuary, please let me know in the comments. Tell me your name, your real name. And if you're on this journey of making your second chapter your best one, subscribe and join me. We don't have to be ghosts in our own homes anymore. I'm going to go wash my brushes now. The sun is fully up, the house is quiet, and for the first time in 75 years, I am exactly where I want to be. I'm Fatima, and I'm finally home. I hope you'll take what I've told you to heart. Not because I'm some expert, but because I'm someone who spent too many years waiting for the world to notice I was still here. If this message, this idea of radical self-occupancy, resonated with you, please click the like button. It's a small gesture, but it tells me that my voice is reaching yours, and it helps other seniors find their way out of the silence too. There is likely someone in your life right now, a friend, a sister, maybe someone from your church or your neighborhood, who is currently sitting in their own waiting room. They are waiting for a phone call that may not come today. Please share this video with them. Sometimes all it takes to break the spell of loneliness is hearing that you have permission to live for yourself again. Be the one who hands them the key to their own cage. I also want to hear from you. We may be in our own homes, but we aren't alone in this journey. Leave a comment below and tell me which city you're watching from. I love seeing the map of our community growing, from the busy streets of Chicago to the quiet suburbs of Florida. It reminds me that the world is vast, and that we are all still a part of it.